I took up backpacking a few years ago, and the first couple times I went, I immediately fell in love with it. Then this happened, and I can confidently tell you that I will never do it or any other type of camping, ever, again. So I went on this trip by myself. I had some vacation days from work stacked up and picked a spot about 3 hours away from where I lived. This was definitely more of a solo trip than I had done before. This area had a bunch of trails to hike and a couple small bodies of water and just massive amounts of woodland. The surrounding area was pretty poor and had a reputation as being sketchy, but the nature and hiking were supposed to be amazing. It's definitely not something I'd recommend doing by yourself the first time. You really need to know your stuff and make sure you bring everything you need, because once you're out there, that's it. Anyway, I drove out, found a park and ride to leave my car in, and spent the first day just hiking in. There were not designated campsites. You'd create a primitive spot you found yourself, set up, and leave it like you found it when you were done. That's basically all I did the first day. Hike in and set up a spot with my tent, cooking gear, pad, and bag. The spot I chose was up on a hill above a lake. My understanding was that the locals used it for fishing, but that their access was way on the other side. On the second day, I went for a long hike and it was extremely humid out. So on the way back, I got down to the water, stripped down to shorts, swam out and cooled off. It was exactly what I needed after a sweaty day of trudging around. When I got back to the shore, I sat there just drip drying for a minute before I decided I would eat something. But when I went back to where I had left my things, they were gone. Like completely gone. Nothing. My first reaction was that I must have made a mistake, and that I was just disoriented and unable to figure out where I had left them. But no, I looked up and down the way I'd come in and everything was gone. Shoes, pants, shirt, backpack full of essentials including my phone. I remember this flood of emotions. On the one hand, I was furious, obviously, but on the other, I was genuinely mortified by the implication that someone was out there in my immediate vicinity and had targeted me in this way. I didn't know if they were gone or watching me or what. I knew nothing except that they knew where I was and had waited until I was in the water to take my things. I had no other choice but to hike the rest of the way back to my camp totally barefoot while getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. Back at camp, everything was normal. Luckily, I had left a change of clothes as well as my wallet, car keys, and some food behind with the rest of my gear. But I didn't have another pair of boots or any of my most essential kit. Almost everything that was a necessity had been in my backpack. It was getting late in the day, and after about an hour or so of fuming about it, I settled on the idea of staying the night and leaving at first light. I had no way to light a fire, and my knife and multi-tool were gone, so for dinner I just ate whatever I had left for food that didn't need a can opener, then crawled into my tent and sleeping bag in the dark. Sometime in the night, I woke up. There was a noise. It sounded like an animal moving around. I had put my garbage in a trash bag and hoisted it up into a tree, so I thought maybe something was sniffing around for it. But as I listened, I could hear that very slowly it was moving toward me and not the garbage. Whatever it was trying to be very quiet. Then, I felt a tug at the bottom of the tent, like whatever it was had nibbled on the guy line between the tent and the stake. I clapped my hands and yelled out to spook it, and the tugging stopped, but whatever it was didn't move away from the tent. Then, I heard steps. It was a person, and there was more than one walking around my tent. I could hear one set of footsteps down by my feet, where the tugging had come from, but I could also hear one up near my head and the entrance to the tent. Then I heard the sound that sent me into a full-blown panic. It was the click and ratchet of a zip tie on the zippers to my tent. Someone was sealing me in. I started screaming and trying to open the tent, but at that exact moment, the whole thing jerked sideways and I fell forward into the side panel, causing the tent to flip onto its side and sending me face first directly into the ground. I hit it so hard I thought I broke a tooth. Then I heard the stakes being pulled up, and before I knew it, the tent was being dragged with me inside. The tent had completely collapsed in on me. I could feel myself being dragged over roots and rocks. At that point, I just started screaming for help as loud as I could. Then I remember this feeling of like floating as the whole thing swung back and forth like a hammock and then was just falling. Whoever it was had thrown me down the embankment. My head hit the ground first, and I saw stars as the rest of me continued to tumble downward, smacking into what felt like trees, rocks, and stumps until I came to rest. It was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. Outside and above me, I could hear voices, muffled. One of them laughed, then it all went quiet. No more movement, no more dragging, nothing. I didn't move for a long time. I just played dead. My shoulder hurt, my head, my ribs, and my wrist, but I had no idea how extensive the damage was. My honest guess is that I lay there for probably an hour until I started to see light coming through the fabric. It very well could have been longer because later I found out I had a concussion, so it's possible I was going in and out of consciousness and more time had actually passed. Anyway, I started trying to move around and was able to tear my way through the tent fabric, which had been punctured multiple times in the chaos. I'm lucky I wasn't stabbed by any of the sticks or branches that had made it through the material. Once I was out and back on my feet, I could see I wasn't bleeding, thank God, but I definitely suspected and would later confirm that I had multiple fractures. I climbed back up the hill and found my way back to the campsite. Whoever it was long gone, but the site had been completely ransacked, or what was left of it anyway. I left everything and got back on the trail immediately. It was dawn, so I was able to see, but I was barefoot and physically wrecked. Hours later, I got back to my car and drove myself to the nearest town. I got directions to the nearest emergency room, and they helped me notify the sheriff. The next day, I was able to drive myself back home. I don't camp anymore at all. Even with friends. A stick snaps at night and I'm awake for the rest of the trip, so I'm done with that. It was hands down the worst night of my life. I honestly believe I'm lucky to be alive, and I can't believe those people are still out there. As far as they knew, they could have killed me and it didn't make a difference to them. I could still be at the bottom of that hill, tangled up in a tent, rotting away for no one to ever find. Okay, so this was a legit traumatizing experience. I hate camping, but once a year my friends drag me into it for a weekend. We're all women in our 30s, a couple of us have kids. We grew up going to the same state park with our parents, and now that we're older and spread out across multiple states, it's a thing we do each year to catch up. I'd rather be visiting a new city or something, frankly, but I'm the odd one out, so this is about as close as I get to a girls' weekend each year without husbands or kids. There isn't any cell service, but the campground is decent. Loops of lean-tos and tent sites, clean bathrooms with plumbing and showers, as well as a small lake and day-use area where people sit at picnic tables, grill, throw horseshoes, and rent pedal boats during the day. One thing we've always done, going way back, is after dark walk down to the water. It was nice down there at night because it was completely deserted, closed to the public, and we always had it all to ourselves. So that's what we did. This was the Saturday night of that weekend, I believe, so the last night before we all headed out the next morning. We left the fire smoldering, grabbed our headlamps and flashlights, then started walking down to the day-use area. You basically walk through the whole campground to get there because it's near the entrance. Most of the other campsites were already hunkered down for the night. There were a few that still had fires going and people sitting around chatting, but otherwise the place was pretty quiet. So we get down there and it's beautiful, stars and moon and all of that. But I hadn't peed before I left and it was starting to nag at me. There's a porta potty in the parking lot of the day use area at the far end of the field. To get there, you cross the clearing and then a small wooden footbridge over the spillway. I left my friends behind and told them I was going to the bathroom. Halfway over the bridge, for no reason in particular, I happened to turn around and look down over the side for a peek at the water below. But my aim was off, and instead, I hit the opposite bank of the creek with my headlamp beam. It lit up the whole other side. At that same moment, I saw movement. Someone stepped behind a tree near the other end of the bridge, the side I had just come from. It was so brief I barely caught it, but I knew I had seen a man. It took me so by surprise that I just stood there, shining the light on the tree. Again, to remind you readers of the context, it's like 10 p.m. in the day use area, where nobody has any reason to be after dark. This guy, with no headlamp or flashlight, had clearly been following me for who knows how long, and now that I had spotted him, was trying to hide from me. I remember holding my breath to help myself calm down and try to think of a solution. I believed that as long as I had my headlamp shining on the tree he was hiding behind, he probably would stay there. But I also knew that my headlamp was basically a moving target, and if I turned around to run, he would know exactly where I was. I started backing away from the bridge toward the gravel path that led up to the parking lot. When I reached the driveway, instinct completely took over, and I don't know why it occurred to me to do this, but it is what it is. I ran behind the nearest tree, took my headlamp off, and basically tied it to the first branch I could find to make it look like a decoy of me. Then I ducked into the shadows where the grass turned into forest, ran back toward the bridge, and just hid in the dark in the woods. I also could not be 100% sure that this guy had not seen me do it, and even though it was dark under all the tree cover, I felt completely exposed. Then I saw him, a figure crossing the bridge. He was moving cautiously, like he wasn't totally sure about the situation. I could see him move across the bridge through the spots of moonlight and then disappear again into darkness on the other side. Then I saw my headlamp move. The light swung and fell to the ground like it had been hit. I knew I had to gamble. I took the risk and made a break for it. I made it across the bridge and up through the break in the trees leading back to the clearing. As soon as I reached the edge of the field, I could see my friends with their lights all the way on the other end. I've never run harder in my life. When I reached them, I quickly explained the situation as I was ushering them onto the trail. We made it back to the campsite and immediately put out what was left of the fire. Then we all got into our respective vehicles, locked the doors, and just stayed in them for the rest of the night. Nobody was comfortable spending the night in the lean-to or tents knowing some weirdo stalker was out there roaming around. Technically, we had broken the park rules by being in the day use area that night, but I didn't care. Safety mattered way more. So on the way out, I mentioned what had happened to the park manager. She seemed deeply concerned and told us she'd look into it, then refunded our reservation. That was the last time we did the group camping thing. Since then, I've gotten my way and we've been able to travel a bit and stay in hotels. But that experience permanently left a mark on me. It will always upset me thinking about what that guy might have done if I hadn't noticed him and just kept walking off by myself, completely unaware. I went on a camping trip through the West and Southwest with a buddy of mine when we graduated from college. We did a kind of road trip thing where we would find dispersed spots along the way. If you don't know, dispersed camping is basically where you camp on public land but not in an official campground. We'd pull off on old fire roads or whatever, drive until you couldn't anymore, and then walk off a bit to find a flat patch and set up camp for the night. No water, no bathrooms, you're on your own. We stayed in regular campgrounds too, but this was free and rarely were there other people to deal with, so we did a little bit of both. I forget what state this was in, but it was late afternoon, early evening when we turned off the main road and onto this rutted dirt path that barely looked like it had been used in years. We drove until we found a clearing big enough to park. Off to the side, maybe a couple 100 yards down the same path, was another vehicle. That threw us a bit. It really wasn't common to see anyone else doing this, even though it wasn't outside the realm of possibility. Beside the car was a small, bright-colored tent, neon orange. At first, we thought, okay, someone else beat us to the punch. Fine. We figured we'd just walk down, say hi, let them know we'd keep our distance, and wouldn't block them in if they needed to leave. Just good neighbor etiquette. So we start down the road, and as we get closer, something starts to feel wrong. The whole vibe was weird. Nobody was there. As you got closer, you could see that the tent wasn't zipped up and it looked half crushed in. The car door was hanging open too. Not wide, but enough that it looked off. There was a sleeping bag dragged halfway out of the tent with dark stains on it. To be fair, I guess it could have been mud, but the same dark color was also along the ground, leading off into the brush. If I'm being honest, both of us thought it looked like drag marks and blood. I know that's dramatic, and maybe it's because we were on edge, but that's what it looked like. I guess there's a reality where this could have been some homeless person's camp, and the reason the gear looked all trashed was because it was old and maybe this person wasn't mentally all there or something. But something about this just felt wrong. The gear was scattered all around. Backpack, clothes, unopened food cans, pots and pans dumped, a cooler tipped over. Just chaos. If it had been a bear or something, you'd see claw marks, food gone, maybe trash torn up. It looked like somebody had been pulled out of that tent fast and violently, and then the sight just completely savaged, like someone was looking for something. That's when we heard it. From behind us, a pickup truck with a covered bed was coming down the road. We didn't know the area, so in theory, this could have been a very busy road, I guess. But I'm being extraordinarily generous with that hypothetical. There were no houses, no buildings at all, nothing else. It was just some dead-end dirt road that went for a couple miles and led to this weird mess of a campsite in the middle of nowhere. My buddy whispered that we had to go. We started making our way back to the car, eyes on the truck, which stopped about 20 yards beyond our own vehicle. It was just idling there. Nobody had gotten out or rolled down a window or anything. The whole time it took for us to walk back to our car, get in and turn around, the truck didn't move. It just watched and waited. My buddy was the one behind the wheel and kept muttering that this was bad. Then we tried to pass it, to get around it and leave, but it didn't move. Now that we were closer, you could see into the cab of the truck just barely enough to make out that there were two people inside. There was no way around the truck unless they moved, and they knew it. In that moment, I think my friend and I both realized that we were completely at the mercy of whoever was in that truck. Maybe they had no connection to this weird scene at all. Maybe it was their messed up homeless camp and they were concerned we had stolen something. Or maybe something way darker had happened here and these people were returning to the site for whatever reason. Not that this was the exact same situation, but I've seen dashcam footage of people literally being held at gunpoint under very similar circumstances. So I think my friend and I, even though we weren't saying it, both knew this could get very ugly very quickly. You could see the two people inside, turning to one another and then looking back toward us like they were having a conversation about us. It was like they were deciding what to do. And then, just like that, the truck went into reverse and pulled over onto the shoulder, allowing us just enough room to pass. The next 30 seconds were the most intense of my life. We drove by at a crawl past the truck. And the whole time, I was expecting pretty much anything to happen, including getting shot through the window. We passed the truck and just kept going down the road. In the mirrors, we could see it continue to sit there on the side of the road, not moving. Eventually, we got back on the highway and drove until we could pull over, maybe 40 minutes down the road at a rest area. Once we were pulled over, we sat in the car in silence until finally I asked him if he wanted to get a motel for the night. We both laughed about it, but he knew I meant it, and he agreed. We finished the road trip, but we only ended up camping in legitimate campgrounds after that, and if an area looked particularly rough, we would get a motel for the night. There's no real way to nail down exactly what we had stumbled upon, but whatever it was, both of us agreed that we felt genuinely lucky for getting out of there safely.